Before we get started today, I just want to tell you a little bit about Innovation Guelph. So Innovation Guelph is a nonprofit regional innovation center. There's about 17 of us across Ontario. We're partnered with the Ontario government and with the federal government. They fund our awesome programs, and we support clients all the way from pre-revenue to multi-million-dollar revenue generating companies. So primarily, what I do, so I am Mickey Campo. I'm the program manager for the startup program that we have here at Innovation Guelph. And we work with innovative, scalable companies with CEOs and founders who are coachable, who are eager to grow their companies. So what we do is we match our companies that we work with up with mentors and industry specialists who have these dynamic backgrounds, everything from entrepreneurs and C-level suite executives to everything in between, experts of all kinds, and we match them up with the companies, regardless of what their strengths are. So if they are looking for potential growth in some areas, if they're looking for sales assistance, then we can pull on experts like Jeff. You're going to be meeting shortly here, and he can come in and help your company grow through whatever stage you're at. So definitely grateful for the funding that we receive from the province and from the federal government for those things. We also receive a significant amount of support through private sponsors as well, which I will be thanking in just one moment. But today's session, Sales in a Digital World, it is going to be presented by Jeff Mitchell. I have already mentioned, is a wonderful Innovation Guelph mentor, but he also is a partner in the Digital Trade School and the Makers Collective. He's a side hustler with a diverse portfolio of work and entrepreneurial experience. He has deep expertise in education, design thinking, and entrepreneurship. He excels at designing and delivering learning experiences that help people and companies transform the way that they do business. Jeff founded an education technology company where he designed and developed a series of continuing education courses in partnership with various post-secondary institutions. His portfolio of work includes being a co-founder and partner of the Digital Trade School, where he designs and delivers training programs to help organizations across Canada become more adaptable. He is also a partner with the Makers Collective, where he leads course development and partnership building to help grassroots entrepreneurs flourish in the world of work. In addition, Jeff delivers freelance webinars, coaching, and consulting with organizations like ours here at Innovation Guelph, as well as the Waterloo Region Small Business Center. So, Jeff today will be presenting to you as a big thank you to our sponsors as well. Marexis and Reese Informatica, ISU Software Core, Invest in Guelph, Miller Thompson, OKR Financial, BDO, and Danby, all excellent organizations. I would welcome you to visit them when you are ready. But for now, I would like to pass you back over to Jeff, and Jeff will take you through his slides and his lessons, and you can learn from his experience. So
awesome. Thank you so much.
Over to you, Jeff.
Yeah, appreciate the introduction here. I'm just going to share the screen.
You have to not
follow. As we get started here, folks, just a friendly reminder, if you could please make sure your microphones are muted as we jump into the session, that would be wonderful. And as we kick off, one of the things I really like to encourage in these online sessions is a really engaging chat. So as we're going through the session today, if an idea that I share really resonates with you, or if you have any questions, drop those comments or questions in the chat. And after the hour presentation, I'll do my best to answer any questions that might come up for you. So thank you so much, Mickey, for the introduction there, and welcome to today's presentation, which is all about business-to-business sales in a digital world. It's no secret that we live in a time of change right now, and that's forcing us as business owners, as entrepreneurs, and as employees of various organizations to rethink the way that we do business and to adopt some different tactics and strategies to close new business effectively in this time of change. And today is all about giving you some really hands-on and applicable ideas that you can apply within your business or the sales role that you currently have to start to see better results amidst this time of change. So with that, we'll jump into the session. Just a quick overview of the agenda here as we jump in. I'm going to start the session by introducing some really important principles around this notion of customer centricity, that effective selling in a digital world or otherwise is really rooted in our understanding of the customer and the people that we serve. And so we'll start today's session by introducing a couple of key frameworks to really help you think through the ways in which you understand your customer, so that as we approach selling, we can really make sure that your offer to serve them really maps up against the needs that you've been able to identify. Right? Winning ultimately starts with the understanding that you have of your customer. And so we'll do about a 20-minute introduction into those principles of how we can better understand your customer's needs and their goals. And then in the back half of the session, we're going to look at how you can leverage the understandings that you build about your customer to really craft and deliver a compelling sales pitch and presentation. Right? This is something that we've all had to adapt to amidst COVID-19, is a more digital approach to sales. And so we'll look at leveraging the principles of customer centricity to help you set up a great pitch by doing some great pre-work, delivering a great sales presentation, one that's compelling and converts new customers. And then we'll talk about how you can follow up that pitch with the aim of really delighting those customers and over exceeding their expectations. So again, I've got about an hour of material that we'll work through together today. That will take us to about 1 o'clock. Then from 1 to 1:30, anybody who's wanting to stick around for an extra Q&A session, we'll spend a good 30 minutes answering any questions that might come up for you during the session today. And again, I encourage you to use the chat throughout the session to drop some questions in, and we can make sure that we answer those in the back half hour. As Mickey mentioned, I have a diverse portfolio of work. I operate as a partner and co-founder of the Digital Trade School and the Makers Collective, and I also run a sole proprietorship. I have a pretty broad experience when it comes to selling. As many of you entrepreneurs will know, you're wearing many hats. I've had some really great experiences selling in a B2B context through the Digital Trade School and the Makers Collective specifically, and it will be those experiences that I draw on today to show you how I've started to transform our approach to selling within this new context, to provide you with some really great examples that can demonstrate how you can start to transform the way that you approach selling to customers, right? And building those relationships. And I think that's ultimately an overarching theme for today, is that, now more than ever, selling effectively is all about our ability to build relationships and to build trust with the people we aim to serve. And as many of you have no doubt experienced, as I have over the last 5 or 6 months during this period of change in which we find ourselves, the approach to building relationships and establishing that trust faces some inherent hurdles when we're now doing this in almost an exclusively digital capacity. And again, today is all about helping you to shift your mindset and adopt some new tactics and strategies so that we can really build great relationships, develop trust, and ultimately convert new customers through some really great selling practices. So as we jump into the material today, I always like to reference some of the sources that I draw on as we enter into the material. These are great learning opportunities for you. Should an idea from today's session really pique your interest, I would point you towards 3 specific resources here that I draw on. So I'll be referencing some of the concepts from Ash Moira's Running Lean. This is one of the foundational texts from the Lean Startup movement, which really took root in Silicon Valley out in California. The basic principle that I draw on in the session today is about running experiments and running tests, right? As we look to adapt the way you sell to this new environment, a key idea here is you're not going to figure it out on the first try, right? We need to treat the way that you adapt your selling as a series of tests and experiments. I also draw on the design thinking methodology, which comes from Stanford University's School of Design. This is essentially a human-centric approach to solving problems. And ultimately, that's the approach that we're going to provide you with today when it comes to selling, is a human approach to selling, right? Putting your customer first and really leading with their needs and their goals, and then developing your sales strategy from the customer out. And then the final set of sources that I draw on for today's session are from HubSpot. HubSpot is a wonderful digital marketing and sales organization out of Boston, down in the US. They have a great range of resources specifically aimed to support you to market and sell more effectively in this digital world. So some really great resources that I'll be drawing on today. And I would also point you to those for some deeper learning opportunities, should some of the ideas really spark an appetite to deepen your learning. Okay, so with that, let's kick things off with our opening section here, an introduction to customer centricity, right? This notion that effectively selling in this new world in which we currently find ourselves is really rooted in how well you understand your customer. And I think that context is really important for us as we begin this discussion of selling in a digital world, is the context in which we currently find ourselves. You know, the forecast for the future is in. Right? Uncertainty is everywhere. This is our new reality. You know, this is no secret. We are living in one of the most compressed periods of change in human history amidst COVID-19. But the reality is we were living in a time of change before COVID-19, right? New technologies entering into the marketplaces have been disrupting the way we do business for years. Shifting political headwinds and political policies have been forcing us to adapt the way we do business. We lived in a time of change pre-COVID-19, and we're going to continue to live in a time of change post-COVID-19, right? Uncertainty, volatility, chaos, change. There was a time when these were the exceptions to the rule. But something we need to be really mindful of as we look to grow flourishing businesses in 2020 is that these are no longer exceptions. These are the rules of the game, right? We need to adopt new mindsets and systems in order to flourish amidst this uncertainty. And I think that's especially important when it comes to selling in this digital world, because one of the realities here is that amidst this uncertainty and change, your customers' needs and goals and frustrations and problems are changing rapidly. Right? Our customers' needs are evolving amidst this time of change. And so for us, building a predictable and repeatable pathway to your customers starts with building an empathetic understanding of their needs and goals. Before we can earn the right to effectively deliver a great sales pitch and presentation, we need to spend time listening and really understanding your customers' needs and goals. Right? A lot of the work that's done to create an effective sales pitch in that digital environment is done before you even get into that room to deliver that pitch. It starts with understanding the jobs to be done. This is the first framework for you today, the first applicable piece that you can take and start to apply within your business or in your sales role, is asking this question, right? Before I can go and effectively sell to new customers, I need to really understand what is the job to be done for that customer. So what is this idea of jobs to be done? This comes from Clayton Christensen. Clayton Christensen was one of the leaders of the MBA school at Harvard and is widely regarded as a global thought leader in the space of innovation and entrepreneurship. And he has a quote that defines jobs to be done that for me really transformed the way that I thought about selling to customers. He says this: customers don't buy products or services. They pull them into their lives to make progress. Put differently, the product or service that you are aiming to sell is not an end goal for your customer. That product or service is a means to an end. Your customer is pulling your product or service into their world to make progress. That's a job to be done. Right? A job to be done is the progress or outcome that an individual seeks in a specific context. What progress are your customers looking to make? Right? They're not simply purchasing a service or a product from you. It's about really understanding their worldview. Why are they bringing you into their world? What return on investment are they looking for? What are their needs and goals? And a key teaching point here is that these jobs to be done are rarely strictly functional in their requirements. There are often really important social and emotional dimensions to consider. And again, the key principle here is that in a time of change, we need to really have our fingers on the pulse of your customer's current state. What is their current reality? What are their current needs and goals, right? What are those jobs to be done? Functionally, what progress are they hiring you to help them to achieve? Are there social or emotional dimensions to that progress? I'll share a couple of examples that highlight this. You know, my first business back in maybe 2013 was called English Never Stops. I left my traditional career path as an ESL teacher and spent about 2.5 years building an education technology company out of the Accelerator Center here in Waterloo. And my goal was to support international students who'd recently moved to Canada to improve their spoken English as they were pursuing post-secondary education here. And one of the first things that I did was just acknowledge that while I had assumptions about the progress that these customers were seeking and why they would hire me to support them in developing their English skills, I needed to do some firsthand research, some primary research to better understand the progress that they were looking for. And so I went through this process of doing customer discovery. I met with dozens of international students who recently moved from China, from different parts of Asia, from the Middle East, from different parts of the world, to really understand, again, not to pitch to them, but to understand their needs and goals, their challenges. And through those conversations, I was able to uncover some insights that really transformed my approach to marketing and selling to that group. What I heard time and again was, yes, they needed help to improve their spoken English and they needed to improve their confidence. But more importantly, what I learned was why they wanted to improve their spoken English and to develop their confidence. It was all about making friends with native Canadian students. It was about having a culturally enriching experience here. It was about no longer feeling lonely or isolated as if they were in a bubble, right? Trapped by their inability to connect and communicate with their peers. It was by doing discovery that I was really able to understand those jobs to be done. And then when it came to pitching and actually selling, you can see how those understandings that you can build, right, about your customers' needs, that empathetic perspective that you can develop, how that can transform the way that you sell, the language that you use, the way that you structure your offer. A more recent example, amidst COVID-19, with our work with the Digital Trade School, where we do internal training programs inside of medium to large size organizations across Canada, we focus on management training and leadership development. And so amidst COVID, we've replicated that process. We've started to do discovery, to plug back into these organizations who we hope to serve, to really better understand their needs and goals amidst this current climate of uncertainty. Right? And overwhelmingly, what we heard is that the current job to be done, the most pressing need that they have, is supporting their staff members in managing their time and energy and their focus as they navigate working from home for the first time. Right? We went out and did customer discovery to really understand what progress our customers are looking for. And in doing that, we've been able to take that discovery and use that language to shape the proposals that we ship when it comes to actually pitching and trying to earn or to win this new business. And again, by doing this discovery up front, you're able to mitigate and prevent a lot of the objections that you might typically come across when it comes to doing your sales pitch or this presentation. And so again, a key idea for you, right, as you begin to think about how you can adapt the way you sell within this digital world, is to start with this fundamental question, right? Who is your customer and what are those jobs to be done? What progress is your customer looking for? What outcome do they seek? What are their functional requirements, but are there social or emotional dimensions to their needs? Right? Uncovering these insights allows us to then approach our actual selling, right, when it comes to doing that pitch, from a place of empathy, right, where we've earned the right to sell because what we've done first is we've spent time doing discovery and listening. And again, that's where your selling begins, right? It's not by leading with a pitch. It's by spending time listening to customers so that you can identify the jobs to be done and really understand their current circumstance and how they see the world. It's by understanding their current circumstance that you put yourself in a position to imagine what better would look like for them. Again, a really interesting metaphor that I heard that really paints this picture very clearly for me. A couple of years ago, I had the privilege of attending a session that was run by the Chief Revenue Officer from HubSpot, the online marketing and sales organization I referenced earlier. And he said that a really important way for you to think about selling is through the lens of a doctor-patient relationship. Think about the last time you visited the doctor, right? You're going in for a checkup. The first thing the doctor does is listen to you. What they don't do is start prescribing you the latest medication, right? They spend time listening, understanding, so that they can earn your trust, but also put themselves in a position to prescribe the right solution. This is the lens through which I encourage you to look at how you market and sell to customers, right? Is through this lens of a doctor-patient relationship. Your first touch points with new customers as you look to earn the opportunity to win new business should be all about discovery and asking questions and spending time listening, right? Listening so that you can understand their current circumstance, listening so that you can understand the way they see the world and the current problems that they face, and ultimately so that you can understand what are those jobs to be done? What progress is your customer looking for? Winning today starts with having a better understanding of that than your competitors do, right? Building that empathy, building that firsthand evidence-based understanding of how your customer sees the world puts you in a position to have started to build that relationship, develop trust, and then earn the right to go into a pitch in a digital environment where you're set up for success in your ability to earn or to win that new business. So ultimately, that's our starting spot, right? It's about doing discovery to understand the jobs to be done and taking a customer-centric approach to selling, right? This is always important, but it's especially highlighted amidst a time of change, right? Like the one in which we currently find ourselves, and we will continue to find ourselves in going forward. As your customers' needs and goals and pains and challenges evolve, we need to have our fingers on the pulse of how those needs are changing, right? This should become an evergreen part of the way you do business, is building in feedback loops so you can continuously connect with customers and have an understanding of those jobs to be done in their current state and as they evolve over time. And then from there, the next question is, how can we start to leverage the understandings that you develop through your customer discovery to really deliver an engaging and compelling pitch that provides you with the opportunity to earn new business and convert new customers? And so as we begin our discussion then of how we can leverage your empathetic understanding of your customers to deliver an outstanding pitch, one that's compelling, engaging, and closes new business, is let's start by identifying some of the principles that should inform how you work in these new circumstances, right? As we look to do business in this digital world, let's look at applying some principles to inform how we work. The first is this. This session is titled B2B Sales in a Digital World. I would encourage us to reframe this notion of B2B selling, business to business, as H to H, human to human. Because ultimately, that's what effective selling is all about. It's about building relationships and trust with the human beings on the other side of that transaction who you aim to serve. And I think that language of service is also really important amidst this current time of change, right? Leading with service and how you can support and help, right? I think that idea is much more implicitly connected when we think of selling as a H to H process, right? Human to human. We need to really understand how your customer sees the world so we can effectively create the right proposal that meets their needs and ultimately delights. So as you leave the session today and you go out there and look to reframe the way that you are selling and the approaches that you're taking, I would encourage you to have the first shift be a shift in your mindset, right? You're not doing business to business sales. It's human to human. And you need to understand those human beings on the other side of that equation. The next step here, and one of the challenges that we're confronted with in this current reality where we're removed from our actual human to human contact from an in-person sense of the word, is applying the principle of using video throughout your sales processes to build better connections. In my opinion, if there's one thing you take away from the session today, it's this. It's that better leveraging video is your key to unlocking the ability to build better relationships and establish trust in this new digital world. I'm going to share a few examples that can demonstrate how you can weave video communication into your sales processes so that you can really intentionally foster that relationship and develop trust in a really intentional way. Again, in our current situation where we're no longer able to have these conversations face to face, or at very least in person. A couple of other principles to be mindful of as we look at this approach to delivering a really great digital pitch or sales presentation. I'm going to share this idea from Malcolm Gladwell about leaving candy behind for your audience. This is a concept that, again, comes from Malcolm Gladwell and is really rooted in storytelling from like the perspective of an author. But I found that this principle is very helpful when it comes to delivering a great sales pitch in a digital world, is being intentional about leaving candy behind for your audience or for your prospective customers. And I'll explain a little bit more about what I mean by that candy as we get into this part of the presentation. And then the two final principles here, right, that are going to inform how you approach doing these pitches in this digital environment: create a dialogue, right? It's a two-way conversation. Again, it's human to human, right? The most valuable part of your digital sales pitch is not the presentation you deliver, it's the dialogue you're able to create afterwards, right? Create dialogue, right? That's a core principle for you. And finally, run experiments, right? Treat adapting the way that you sell to customers as a series of tests, and acknowledge that anytime you're looking to make an adaptation within your business, you have a series of assumptions about how you might adapt. Let's remove our ego from the equation and acknowledge that there's a chance that some of the things that you have assumed are going to improve the way that you sell to your customers. Some of the assumptions may be off there, and that's okay. Again, remember, adaptation is a process, right? It's about running experiments, collecting evidence, and looking to continuously iterate and evolve and improve the way that you sell in this new digital context. So these are your principles to be mindful of as you approach conducting a compelling pitch in a digital environment. And now let's look at the 3 stages of doing so. So to begin with, we're going to look at the setup, right? Pre-pitch considerations. Again, the context here, this comes after your discovery, right? After those initial touch points that you have with a prospective customer, where you're really asking questions and listening to understand their current reality, their needs and goals. That's now put us in a position where we've organized an online pitch. Maybe it's being delivered over Zoom, just like this session. So how can we set ourselves up for success before we go live for that pitch? Let's talk a little bit now about the setup. The first piece, and probably the most effective thing that I've seen in terms of transforming the way that we sell, specifically within the digital trade school, is using video communication around that pitch meeting. Right before COVID-19, we were sending, for the most part, written agendas and summaries of the desired outcome and sort of a welcome message in advance of that meeting. Again, as we've been limited in our ability to connect in person with customers, we've looked at video as an avenue to foster those relationships and develop trust. And so for you, as you approach your pitch, your online sales pitch, in the days before that session, record a personalized pre-meeting video introduction. Introduce the session agenda. Introduce the desired outcome. Express your excitement and gratitude for the opportunity to learn how you can better serve and support those customers, and bring your energy to that video, right? Bring a personal touch to that video. It's going to build your connection with your customer. right? We now do this as part of our sales process. In the days before any pitch or presentation that we're delivering, we create a short 90-second to maybe 2.5-minute welcome and introduction video, right? Again, this goes a long way when it comes to building those relationships and building trust, right? It gives them more opportunities to see your face, to hear your voice, to connect with you as a human, right? Human to human sales. So send a pre-meeting video introduction, right? Bring that energy, establish a clear agenda and desired outcomes, and express that excitement and gratitude for the opportunity. Next, when it comes to setting yourself up for success pre-meeting, we need to set up your slide deck for success. And I think the biggest thing that I've learned over the course of the last 4 or 5 months doing business in this new environment is that less is more, right? Have a clear agenda as your opening slide. And I would encourage you to aim for 10 slides or less in your presentation. Don't overstuff those slides, right? Key statistics, key stories, key summaries of your feature set and requirements. But remembering the environment here, you're not standing in person delivering this on a big screen in front of a room. You are delivering this to a series of people sitting in front of a 15-inch screen. We don't want them to be removed from listening to the valuable things that you're sharing because they're spending time combing through copious amounts of text on your slide. Right? Again, this seems like a small detail, but it's hugely important in this new context of delivering these pitches online. Don't overstuff your slides. Keep them filled with useful stats and stories. But again, the key idea here is to have key takeaways and high level, again, value added pieces of content that you can then speak to and add detail. And again, I know this seems like a very minor and nuanced piece, but holding your audience's attention and being able to create that compelling environment really hinges on them being tuned in with you. And again, having them distracted by reading paragraphs on a slide is counterproductive to that aim. And finally, as you look to set yourself up for success in advance of your actual pitch, ask yourself this: do you have an internal champion from within the organization that you're selling to who is able to review your draft proposal before the pitch? You know, with Digital Trade School, we're going through a process right now with a provincial government, and we are in the process of setting up a pitch in the next couple of weeks. But we've been doing discovery for the last 6 weeks with a champion over with that branch of the provincial government. And we've been able to do discovery, understand the needs and goals, and now also start to develop an internal champion who's actually going to sit down with us next week and review our draft proposal before we do the pitch to the wider decision makers within the organization. Do you have a champion from the other side of the table who you've worked with through your discovery, who you can do a walkthrough of your presentation with in advance of the delivery? Right? That'll go a long way to setting you up for success. And finally, as you approach your pitch, we need to be really clear about your tool stack, right? What are the presentation tools that you use, right? Is it Google Slides? Is it PowerPoint? Is it Canva? What tool are you going to use to actually record these welcome videos, your introduction video, right? I use a free recording tool from Vidyard. A local Kitchener-Waterloo video marketing technology organization. They have a great Chrome extension that's a free download that allows you to do screen captures, right? Where you have your face is sort of in the bottom left corner of the screen as you're walking through a slide deck, right? I'd encourage you to check that tool out if you're unfamiliar with the landscape of different video tools. And finally, what's your video conferencing software of choice, right? Are you using Zoom? Are you using Teams? And let's make sure that that's clearly communicated to the folks on the other side of the table so that we have alignment and avoid any technical hiccups in advance of that session. So setting yourself up for success, send a welcome video, build trust and build that relationship by showing up on video rather than exclusively through email. As we're talking about video, I'll mention that this is something that we've woven into our practices with Digital Trade School beyond the initial selling process, right? We've replaced a lot of our email communication with customers with video communication, right? The clients I work with at Innovation Guelph in a mentoring capacity, I send video summaries of our coaching sessions following each session, right? It's delighted and over exceeded expectations, and it's helped me to build a better relationships with these people who I've actually never been able to meet in person given our current circumstances. So again, I think a key idea when it comes to weaving video into your sales processes is that there's a wider application there for you to look at leveraging that tool to foster greater relationship building and trust across the spectrum of your customer's life cycle. And finally, as you set yourself up for success, be really mindful of that presentation deck that you're pulling together, right? Less is more. Let's keep the slide content to really high level value added pieces. And let's try to identify an internal champion on the other side of the table who can do a review with you in advance of the actual pitch. So we've set ourselves up for success. Now we need to talk about the delivery. Right? How do we execute a great pitch in this digital environment, right? Again, coming out of that discovery, having identified those jobs to be done, sent a welcome video and having a deck that is created in a sort of less is more mentality. Now we need to look at tactics that can support you in delivering a really great pitch in this digital environment. And so again, up front, set a clear agenda and structure. Right? You'll have a friendly welcome at the beginning of that pitch. And then immediately you're going to grab control of that conversation by setting a clear agenda. And again, this seems like a small nuanced detail, but I find its added emphasis is very important here because again, you are not physically standing at the front of the room, which gives you an inherent command over that conversation. Right? We want to establish that control by articulating the really clear agenda. Right? What are those 2, 3, or 4 pieces that you're going to work through together during the pitch? And then let's ask a really great question as you're setting that agenda. Is there anything else that we would like to add to the agenda? Right? Provide the people in the room with the opportunity to co-create that with you. But ultimately, it's setting a clear agenda up front that outlines a very clear structure for the conversation. And within that structure, we want to make sure that you are creating space for dialogue, right? Creating space for a two-way conversation rather than seeing a pitch as being one direction. And so what does that structure look like for you, right? And that's what we're talking about next is what is that pitch structure? And then how can we weave in this notion of candy and leaving candy behind for your customer? The structure that we use with Digital Trade School when we're working through a pitch or a proposal in this context, right? We open by demonstrating that we understand the current reality and the problem or pain, right? We show that we've spent time listening. We show that we've spent time uncovering those needs, right? That we understand the current reality, right? Again, this is all done in the name of building trust and enhancing that relationship. The next part of our structure is demonstrating expertise and capability to improve that current reality, right? This is where we would provide some high-level examples and some statistics around some of the other organizations who we've worked with in this similar capacity. From there, we enter into the third and sort of the meat of the proposal, which is walking through the overview of our proposed solution and what the return on investment might look like. And then finally, the fourth and probably most important part of the session is we open a dialogue. And we aim for that to take up 50% of the meeting. If I have an hour booked, I'm spending no more than 30 minutes working through our proposal and the actual pitch so that I can create space for that dialogue for us to have an open conversation about the fit and the next steps and any questions. And I'll talk more about that dialogue in a moment. Again, my purpose today isn't to be totally prescriptive for you around what your structure should look like. You likely have a structure to these pitch presentations that you have been delivering previously. And in this digital environment, I don't know that a lot needs to change in terms of the structure. I think what needs to shift is us being really intentional about providing some key ideas and takeaways that our customers are going to remember and really jump out to them as a piece that they will share internally as they continue to socialize your proposal and have a discussion about the fit. And this is where Malcolm Gladwell's idea of candy comes up, right? He says that candy, these are the parts of your story that are easiest to talk about and easy to talk about casually and remember. So don't forget the candy, right? What is the candy in your pitch? We want to have some compelling and memorable stats or stories that really stay with your customer after the pitch. Right? Something that they're going to be able to recall and share as they're, again, continuing to have internal conversations as they socialize your proposal and look to move towards a purchasing decision. So what's your candy? Right? A really great example, right? Here's a stat. The average retention rate is higher by 35% for personally tailored videos, meaning upselling other services to current clients becomes much easier when implementing video tactics. That's a piece of candy from this presentation, right? It's a memorable stat. The average retention rate grows by 35% when we start to weave video communication into our retention strategy, right? We've seen this work for us in digital trade school. You know, a really interesting piece of candy that we've been leaving behind in our pitches is this. You know, I mentioned earlier, the need and the goal that we're ultimately working with organizations to solve and to alleviate is, you know, amidst this uncertainty and change, how can managers support their teams in having the right priorities and focus and managing their time and their energy? And a key piece for us as we've looked to, again, create a compelling case for us to be able to alleviate those pains and solve that problem is one of the root causes for struggling to manage your time and energy and focus when we're talking about doing business within the context of a time of change is that many of these organizations use really rigid waterfall project management structures. Right? I'm sure many of you who work within traditional organizations would be familiar with this, right? Where we have a new initiative that we will want to launch. We build a really detailed 12-week plan to get that idea to market. We sort of cross our fingers and hope that that plan is the right thing to do. We execute that full plan only to learn at the end that we've built the wrong thing or we haven't mapped up our new offering against our customers' needs. Right? The root cause is that in a time of change, it's very risky to start with a big bet, to place a big bet to release a fully realized version of a new product or service. The language that we use to help shift the mindset of our customers is, well, what's a smaller bet you could place? Right? As you look to support your team members in becoming more agile and adaptable and better managing their time and energy and focus, let's look at reframing from placing big bets and doing waterfall project management to taking a more agile approach by placing small bets. And one of the things that we've observed that has been very enlightening is when we have follow-up conversations with these customers coming out of those pitches as we look to close new deals, is how often they're using our language now, right? It's like we really realize that we need to be placing smaller bets. And again, that's a key idea for you as you look to establish, again, in this new environment, your ability to deliver a really compelling pitch. We need to be intentional about leaving behind what Malcolm Gladwell calls candy, right? What are some of those really compelling stats or stories that coming out of that presentation are going to be top of mind for your customer, right? Things that they will reference and leverage as they continue to have internal conversations to socialize your proposal as you work towards, again, closing that new business. So again, as you look to deliver a really compelling pitch, let's set a clear agenda and have a very clear structure up front that allows you to be in control of that conversation. Let's make sure that you carve out explicit space to create dialogue, and let's be intentional about leaving behind candy for your audience. Right? Those memorable, quotable pieces that they will leverage as they continue to have conversations to better socialize your proposal internally. Next up, as you're delivering this digital pitch, is being very intentional about your voice and using silence. Again, this seems like a very nuanced and minor detail, but it's hugely important in this new context, right? You do not have the luxury any longer of being at the front of the room, right? Where your communication is much more complex than simply the words that are coming out of your mouth. If I was delivering this presentation to you in person right now, you would have a much better sense of how active I am with speaking with my hands, right? How expressive I am when I'm in the space, right? You don't have the ability, again, if we look at selling as relationship building, as building trust, right? Your presence in the room fosters a lot of that. Your ability to hold eye contact with people who you're connecting with, your ability to express yourself with your facial expressions and your body language. All of that is lost or greatly reduced when it comes to delivering these pitches online. And so it becomes so important, like it's magnified, the importance of being really intentional about how you're using your voice and changing your expression and how you're leveraging silence as a tool, right? I record every sales pitch that I do with the permission of the customer that I'm connecting with, obviously. And when I reviewed my first few digital pitches that I conducted back in April and May, oof, I was appalled at, again, nobody likes listening to themselves on video, right? But I was appalled by two things. Number one, by how monotonous my voice was and how little expression I had and how it lacked being compelling and engaging because I wasn't being thoughtful enough about the limitations that I had on my ability to express myself and how my voice had become the most important tool. I also noticed that being in a digital environment, I needed to be much more intentional about holding space and using silence, right? When I deliver a session in person or when I deliver a pitch in person, it's much easier to have triggers to hold space and silence as you make eye contact with different people around the room. What I found is when I started delivering these pitches digitally is I was rushing. I wasn't pausing. I wasn't holding space for ideas to be digested by the audience. So while these are two very small and nuanced points, I think they are hugely important for you to consider as you approach selling in this digital space is being really thoughtful about how you use your voice and your expression and how you leverage silence, right? Let silence hang, right? Use it as a tool to add emphasis. And then finally, right, as you approach these pitches, as I've mentioned before, it's an experiment, right? It's an experiment. Adapting takes time, right? Change is difficult in the beginning, messy in the middle, and then beautiful at the end. But to get to that beautiful end where you've adapted your ability to sell effectively online, right? You're going to have to work through some challenging initial pitches that you do online, right? And that's okay, right? Let's remove ego from the equation. Let's approach it with humility and let's constantly look for opportunities for us to improve how you're approaching the way you sell in this digital world. Right? It's all about taking this lean startup approach, build, measure, learn, right? Design your first experiment to improve how you're going to sell. Add a video introduction to your process, right? Add a video communication to the end, right? As a post follow-up, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. And then let's run a test and let's see how things go. When we initially started doing more and more digital approaches to selling, specifically leveraging video with Digital Trade School, we started to A/B test the different uses of video, for example, right? For some clients, we sent very simple introduction and welcome videos that were 90 seconds to 2 minutes long. For others, we started sending 15-minute initial videos, doing an initial overview of the proposal before the session even began. And then what we found was that the short videos that we watched, everybody watched the whole thing, right? The longer videos that we shared in advance of the session, right? Everyone was watching them, but they were dropping out 5 or 6 minutes in. And that's the beauty of using tools like the Vidyard tool that I described earlier, is it gives you that data. Are these videos actually being watched? How long are people sticking around for? And through our first experiment, we identified we were over-investing in those longer videos, that a 15-minute intro video was not necessary, right? That a quick 2.5 minute video helped to build the relationship, foster that trust. Again, treat this as an experiment. And as I've been mentioning from the outset, this is a human process, right? This is a quote from HubSpot, sell like a human, right? The key idea here is the most productive part of your sales pitch will be the discussion you foster after delivering your pitch. So the key idea here is after you've worked through your understanding of their current state and you've demonstrated your expertise and you've overviewed your proposal and the feature set and the return on investment. Now we want to ask open-ended questions to really foster a conversation, right? Have a couple of questions planned that you can pose to your customer here and really invite them to share their initial thinking, invite them to ask questions for clarification. And then let's work together to co-create clarity on what your next steps look like. Right? Provide a really clear summary of your meeting outcomes and then co-create that clarity around next steps. But again, I think the key idea here is approaching this as a human-to-human process, right? And a key part of that is that these pitches are not a one-way presentation. It's about fostering dialogue, right? About working together to then co-create clarity on the next steps. And again, as a best practice, I would recommend you hold upwards of 50% of the time you have allocated to these pitches for that conversation and that dialogue, right? Again, as you wrap up, you're providing a summary of the key outcomes and you're co-creating clarity on the next steps. But you're not done, right? At that point. Right? We always want to aim to delight your customers and over exceed their expectations. And so coming out of your pitch that you've delivered, we want to be really thoughtful about what are your post-pitch rituals or processes. How can you follow up and delight that customer coming out of that session? And again, this is where we're going to encourage you to use more personalized videos to follow up, right? This screenshot on the left there, that's my business partner and our co-founder of Digital Trade School, Dave Inglis. I actually pulled this. This is the very first video follow-up like this that we did for a customer. And we actually ran a test of this pre-COVID. This is back in 2019 where that we started to experiment with these post videos. And again, the key idea here is in a digital world now where we're not able to connect in person, we want to have relationship building and developing trust top of mind. And video is your key to enhancing that. So send a personalized follow-up video, right? Express your thanks and gratitude, provide a reminder of next steps that you've outlined, and then attach an additional resource, right? Provide a video walkthrough of the proposal as a whole for them to have as a reminder. Share an extra video case study that you've created, articulating the work you've done with a previous client and the return on investment that they were able to achieve through working with you, how you were able to serve and support them. Again, the nature of that additional resource, there's going to be some variation, right? Depending on the space that you're in and the nature of your customer segment. But I think the key idea here is let's over exceed and delight their expectations by providing a really personalized follow-up that not only expresses gratitude and outlines next steps, but also provides an additional resource, right? A video overview of the proposal or a video case study are the two use cases that we've found to be effective in this post follow-up sort of stage. And then the final piece, right, as you're looking at sort of the post-pitch processes and rituals is just to acknowledge that the best practices that I've shared with you today, right, from understanding jobs to be done and building empathy with your customer, to weaving video into your processes to better create that human-to-human connection as we look to do business in this time of change and uncertainty, These principles can be woven into every part of your sales processes, right? This is Ash Moira's customer factory blueprint, which I love as a model because it acknowledges that selling doesn't end at the point of revenue generation, right? So what we've talked about today is how you can really better acquire customers by starting with discovery and identifying those needs and goals, and then using a really great pitch process with videos bookending either side of it and best practices to deliver a great pitch to ultimately be able to win that business and secure that net new revenue. But of equal importance, as we know, is being really thoughtful about how we retain customers and how we can delight customers to the extent that we develop referral engines or evangelists for your business. I think the key principle here is that these ideas that have been shared today are equally applicable during these parts of your customer's life cycle and your sales processes, right? Probably the biggest area that we have seen return on investment from through the incorporation of video into our communications is actually in our retention rates, right? Just last week, we were actually able to retain 2 customers who we just signed pre-COVID-19 to 2 of our largest contracts ever. And our approach in using video for almost every single communication with that customer, we've heard from them time and again, has transformed the way they think about communicating with their own customers, but has also helped us to increase the amount of trust and the depth of that relationship in a short amount of time where, again, we're not able to have the luxury of getting together in person and having some of those interactions. So again, core principle here is that the ideas that were shared today were really pointed at this acquisition process, right? And acquiring a new customer and leveraging these best practices around creating more human connections to win new business. But those same processes and those same principles will be of equal value to you as you look at increasing your retention rates and potentially driving referrals and an evangelist engine within your business. Okay, so I think that takes us right to 1 o'clock. So we are almost exactly on schedule here. So first of all, thank you so much for joining today and for choosing to invest time joining this Toolkit Tuesday session with Innovation Guelph. We're so grateful to have been able to spend time with you today. And I'm always especially grateful to be able to share some of my experiences to support you as an entrepreneur in growing your business or working in a sales role to see better results within your current role. I'd love to hold space now for about a 30-minute Q&A here. And again, if you have to duck out at 1 o'clock now, you're not going to offend us if you have to go. We know you all have lots on the go here, so no worries at all if you have any other questions. Or sorry, if you have to duck out. But otherwise, I see a couple of questions in the chat, so I'm going to start with those. If you have other questions that have come up, feel free to drop them in the chat, or if you're comfortable talking about human-to-human interaction, I always like to encourage people to raise their hand, and you can turn on your microphone and ask questions as well. But give me one moment here, and I'm just going to work through the questions that have come in the chat. So I'll go from the bottom.
Yeah, so Jeff, Jordan has actually been keeping track of them and when the questions came up. So she might be able to give you some context as to when the questions were asked as well.
You guys are the best. That's awesome.
So I'll kind of, wherever Jordan is.
Here.
Oh, there you are.
Awesome.
Everybody moved when you turned off your share screen on me.
Yeah, no problem. So thanks, Mickey. That makes it really easy for me. So that's wonderful. So Jordan, if you wouldn't mind, if you're comfortable, maybe just you can just read the first question on the list and any context that you might have, and then I can do my best to answer it if that works.
Sure, sounds good. Okay, so our first question that we got was, what does your discovery process look like and what specifically do you do? And I believe that question came in around slide 7 when we were talking about building an empathetic approach with your customers and establishing their needs and goals. And Sandra, if that's not what you were referring to, please unmute yourself and clarify, but I think that would give us a good starting point for that answer.
Yeah, good stuff. So customer discovery, right? This is primary market research, right? How this manifests is an interview, right? It's a conversation so the first touch points that we have with new customers have nothing to do with selling, right? We spend time initially with a 30 to 45-minute conversation doing discovery to better understand their current needs and goals and their current circumstances. So what I have actually here, and so Mickey and Jordan, let me know if this is feasible, but I actually have about an 8-slide customer discovery playbook that I've built that is essentially sort of, these are the questions you should be asking, this is the order, here's a tracking template to sort of track your findings. If you guys are open to it, Mickey and Jordan, I can share that resource with the two of you, and then we can just share that with everybody on the session.
Absolutely, because we're going to follow up after this too with a copy of the slide deck and all of that too. So absolutely, we can add that in.
Perfect. So I've got I think it's about an 8-slide sort of playbook to do these conversations. But again, essentially, like when you think about doing market research, right, to better understand your customer, often we're drawn to secondary market research, right? Looking at reports, at trends and things like that. And yes, those are valuable. I'm not saying that you should ignore that entirely. But again, selling today is all about relationship building and trust. And what we found is that you eliminate most of the objections that you're going to get during that pitch by starting your selling with listening, right? It's that doctor-patient mindset, right? It's what is your current reality? What challenges are you facing? What would better look like? So I'll provide a bit of a playbook for you as a resource there. Sandra, there you are. I've been trying to find you on the screen. Any follow-ups from that at all, or anything else that I might be able to clarify there?
No, I think that makes sense. I mean, I do a similar process, but I'm very interested in your specific process just to see if there's some new innovative things. Yeah.
Awesome. So then so the resource that I share with you will be really valuable, but that book, Running Lean, that I referenced would also be one to consider. It's essentially a playbook as well. That's why I like it. It's not sharing the theory of why you should do customer discovery. It's essentially a handbook to say, okay, here's a bit about the theory. Now here's some tools to help you kind of get off to the races. So I would recommend that one for you. That's a really great read.
Thank you.
No problem. Great question. Yeah. Okay, Jordan, if you're okay to move on to the next question here, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. Firstly, there's a question in between that I do believe was answered. Leslie asked, what's the name of the screenshot tool you use? And I think you put up Vidyard. A copy will be sent out, so that will be in writing for everybody. So our other question would be, what easy systems do you suggest to do this with a follow-up also from Laura saying, for the initial video, what tool do you specifically use? So I know you had a slide up that talked about PowerPoint, Vidyard, and then another application, but for recording that initial video, when you're creating that first contact with customers, what programs do you suggest would be easiest or most effective?
Awesome. So I've just dropped a link in the chat for everyone there. That's to the actual website for the Vidyard tool that I use. So again, it's a free Chrome extension that you download. And so that's the tool that I use to create all of my video communication with customers, whether it's the pre-pitch video or the post-pitch video. And I really like it for a couple of reasons. Obviously, the price is right. Having a free tool is always wonderful, but I also love the data it gives you, right? So it'll actually tell you, if you've sent that, if there's 3 people who you're pitching to, and you send that video to them before the pitch, you can actually see, did all 3 people watch it? Did one of them watch it? Did 2 of them watch it, but only the first 30 seconds? So it gives you some really good data to see, are you actually having a return on investment, right? Are people actually spending the time to review these? And they're local. Yeah, they're KW, which is always great as well, right? So Jordan, forgive me here. I'm not sure if I answered all parts of that question. Let me know if I've missed anything there.
I think so, unless Laura wanted to step in if something's unanswered, but if not, I think it's okay. Oh, she has a follow-up question.
Yeah, I think I just did the follow-up question about whether you embed the videos in an email or if that tool just sends it out directly, or what's the specific process you use for that? Thanks.
Oh yeah, good question. So you just simply copy the link, right, and drop it in the email, and then you have the option to drop just the link or to embed the link with the video in the email. So it gives you both options there.
Thank you.
No problem, Laura. Anything else I can clarify for you there?
No, that's great. Thank you. I'm going
Yeah,
to
no
start using
problem.
that right away.
Yeah. And the one thing I might encourage you to do, right, is let's also acknowledge that if you're not used to being on video, that it's horribly uncomfortable the first few times to do it, right? Like, just permission to be human here and to feel a bit, I know when I started doing these videos, I would feel physically anxious before recording them, right? Because again, if you're not used to it, like seeing yourself on camera, hearing your voice, these are all things that we need to get used to. So I found what we started to do with Digital Trade School and with Makers Collective is we just started doing video communications to each other, right? Like internally within our team, just like some low risk opportunities to practice, right? And then the other thing I would emphasize that you do is, work towards doing these videos in one take, right? Where if you make a small mistake at the beginning, just keep going. That humanizes you. That's part of the process, right? Because I know at first I would make a small mistake, I would stop, do the video again. Next thing I know, I've spent 2.5 hours recording 1 2-minute video. And that's not what I'm telling you is the best approach to improving your sales processes, right? It's definitely a cost benefit piece. So give yourself some permission to feel a bit anxious when you're approaching that, right? It is a new skill. It's a new medium of communication. And if you have some low risk opportunities to send video communications like that, take advantage of that, right? It's a skill that you'll develop. It's a muscle that you'll build over time, but also totally understand if you're feeling a little bit apprehensive about leveraging video in that way. Awesome. Okay, Jordan, we can keep going along here if you're okay to read the next question.
Yeah, absolutely. We have another question from Sandra. She asks, what do you mean by socializing your proposal? That came around the 3/4 way mark.
Yeah. So again, your pitches are, obviously there's different contexts where you're doing your pitches, right? Sometimes when you do your pitch, the decision makers, all of them will be in the room, right? The people who have the power to make the decision to work with you going forward, all of those decision makers will be in the room. But it's often the case that that's not true, right? That you have one decision maker in the room, but that person needs to get buy-in from some additional stakeholders afterwards. Socializing your proposal is the work done internally after your pitch to talk about the viability of that proposal, right? That's why leaving candy behind, really memorable stat or story is so valuable. That's why providing a video resource afterwards. That's one of the comments we've loved from, again, one of our approach is let's build a champion internally before we do that pitch, right? And going back to the initial question, that's a byproduct of doing discovery, is you build that relationship and that trust with one stakeholder inside of that organization. Now they're helping you to sell that proposal internally. And you want to make it as easy for them to sell for you as possible, right? They are not going to be able to articulate your proposal in the same way that you can, right? That's just the reality. So let's make it easy for them to do that. After the session, let's send them a 10-minute overview of the proposal so that when they're having conversations with other decision makers, they can share their input, they can share some of that candy, and then they can say, hey, watch this video. Right? And again, the beautiful thing is when you use a tool like Vidyard, you see when that's happening, because all of a sudden 9 more people have watched that video and you haven't shared it with anyone, right? And so now you know that that process is underway. So that's what I meant when it was socialize the proposal, right? Is the variable there is, are all of the decision makers in the room, right? And again, there's so many variations of B2B selling, right? If you're selling into small businesses, then it's likely just one person who's making that decision. Right? If you're selling into, large publicly funded organizations, then there's probably a pretty complicated hierarchy of people who need to sign off on something before a purchasing decision can be made. And so again, what's really helpful for you through the discovery process, so this is a really good insight here, I think, that's coming out of this, is not only is your aim to understand the needs and goals of your customers, but you also want to better understand the decision-making landscape within that organization, right? Are you talking to the decision maker? You might not be, right? If not, you need to figure that out so you know who you need to get buy-in from, right? Are there influencers in that organization, right? People who, have real sway or pull over decision-making. And are there saboteurs in the organization, right? Are there people who might be deeply invested in this not happening because it threatens part of their workload, right? So again, I think a byproduct of your discovery is understand your customers' needs more effectively. That allows you to craft the right proposal. Understanding the decision-making landscape equips you with the insights that you need to empower that champion to help you to sell internally, right? And then the video resources, right? The benefit is twofold. One, builds that relationship with your champion. And two, let's make their job as easy as possible to socialize the idea internally and to share it with their colleagues. And that's where the follow-up resources are hugely valuable, especially because they're unexpected. I don't tell them that these are coming, right? The next morning, so I saw another question come in that was turnaround time, right? I would say like 24 hours, make hay while the sun shines. Like my dad's a farmer and that's the way he would approach this, right? Is like the iron's in the fire and it's hot, let's keep it going here. So I would say within 24 hours, follow up. And you didn't tell them to expect that video resource. That's something that they're gonna get and say, wow, because likely no one's ever done that before, right? No one's ever sent them a video walkthrough to make it that easy for them to have internal conversations. So apologies, Jordan, I feel like I jumped across a few questions there, so I hope I didn't confuse things. Are there others that we haven't been able to address that have come in through the chat so far?
Not while you were talking. You did address that last question from Sue, which was turnaround time. So that's fantastic. So there's nothing else to address from the chat box.
Wonderful. Okay, so I'm just going to comment. Sandra made a really good comment here. I found it helpful to have someone off camera interviewing me so that I'm more engaging, right? So rather than you just talking at the camera, you have somebody ask you a couple questions, right? That's a great tactic. And I think it brings up a broader point, which is find the approach that works best for you, right? You may need somebody to read those questions to you, right? You may need to start your video by not showing your face and just doing a walkthrough of the slides with your voice because it makes you so anxious to be on video. That's okay, right? It's about when I share sessions like this, what I'm not trying to do is give you rules that you need to follow to the letter, right? Because everyone's different and everyone's business and circumstances and skill sets are different. What I want to give you are a set of principles that you can bend and shape based on your context and your circumstance. So I think, Sandra, if that works for you, that's awesome. Run with that, right? That's great. And I love the awareness to say, hey, this is something that's helpful for me in these contexts. Yeah, Leslie's mentioned, she writes speaking points on paper and taped it to the wall, right? For all of you guys know, I might have a giant piece of paper behind me that's had this whole presentation laid out, right? Again, if that works for you, that's great, right? Again, for me, my best practice is if I read things, it's so hard for me to be expressive while I'm doing it, right? I fall into this monotone sort of trap. So for me, it's all about being well rehearsed. Like I practice my pitches. I'll record them to myself. I'll deliver them to my business partners. We'll give each other feedback. That's how I get comfortable enough to then be able to just not off the cuff, because that sounds unprepared, but without reading, just walk through a presentation. And then what I'm thinking about, right? Because I know I'm prepared. So all I'm focused on is bringing a ton of energy and like bringing myself to that session, right? And showing up in the best way possible for my customer. For me, the only way that I've been able to get to that spot is if I'm really well rehearsed and really well practiced, right? Because then I know I've got confidence in the material and now I'm just focusing on showing up, right? Showing up to serve as the best version of myself so I can be of most value to my customers. So again, I think it's about finding what's the best thing for you to get in that position where you can be at your best, right? You know, an interesting analogy we often use to describe this is like, if you look at high performers in certain industries, like athletics, for example, or the arts, right? People have pre-game rituals, pre-performance rituals that they perform to get in the right mindset, right? In the sporting world, it's a pre-game meal and a pre-game stretch and a pre-game song that you listen to, right? What is that for you? What are your rituals that inspire high performance, right? Because again, that principle applies to any walk of life professionally, right? Is to be at our best, to perform as the best version of ourselves, right? There are certain things that we can do, right? Rituals that we can install to put ourselves in a position to be at our best, right? And so again, for you, it's about figuring out what is that for you, right? Is it having your high level, like your 4 key talking points written on a board behind you before you do your pitch, right? It might be, again, rehearsing like me, and then treat it as an experiment, right? Treat it as a test, because things are going to continue to change and evolve around your business, right? And what works well for you in the next 2 months might need to change come January, February 2021, right? But it's taking that approach of running experiments that allows you to continuously iterate and improve the approach that you take. Awesome. So I'm just looking at some of the comments here.
People
Awesome.
are loving your presentation, Jeff.
I appreciate that, guys. Yeah, any other questions? We have about 10 minutes left here. I was just combing through to see if we had any other questions. It doesn't look like we do. So any other questions that haven't been asked in the chat yet, or anything else that I might be able to clarify for the folks who are still on the session here?
Maybe there's just not any more questions.
That's
I think
okay.
you've
Appreciate the
answered everybody's. So people are finding what you talked about really helpful. I absolutely love that quote you used at the beginning about pulling instead of selling things to people, that people are actually pulling them. They're not buying it, they're pulling it. So
Yes.
I thought that was neat. I have a long career in sales and stuff too, and I can identify with that because that is what people do. They don't care too much about the gadget. If the gadget's going to do something for them and they can identify with how it's either going to take away a hurt or it's going to make their world a better place. I mean, that is definitely what they're buying. They're buying what's missing, right? So pulling it, I like that.
I love that. And that's a really good example then of like a piece of candy, right? At that pull idea. That's what you're going to take from the session as a memorable thing. And when someone asks you about it, you might share that, right? And so that's a really great example, right? As you look to deliver these pitches, is what are those 1 or 2 key phrases or way you position things that really stick in your customer's mind, right? That are going to support with that socializing of your proposal afterwards.
Yeah. I'm a very visual person, so that whole pulling concept and the leaving behind the candy and all of those things, it makes sense visually to me as well as just logical sense too, right? Anyhow, everybody's saying thank you. So I would like to say thank you from Innovation Guelph as well. So thank you, Jeff. It was a great session. If you have any questions, you can email Jordan or I or whoever your program manager is. Feel free to reach out to us at info@innovationguelph.ca. Visit the website to find out about all the events. And we are super happy all of you were able to join us today. And thanks, Jeff. It was a great session.
My pleasure.